I just think we think the whole idea is ridiculous. The idea that he's going to invade Panama or that he's going to try and take over Greenland by force.
The question is, who would stop him? Who would stop him genuinely? Would NATO stop him? Because America is NATO, right? Would China stop him? Would Russia stop him? Given that he has the House and the Senate, if you now think, as many do, that essentially the legislative arm is weakened because Trump can push his lawmakers around as he sees fit. Yeah.
This is the bit I don't understand. I mean, it's the same over this kind of whole idea of recess appointments. The idea that Donald Trump would be able, when the House isn't sitting, to appoint anybody he wants to a senior role without a confirmation hearing. The idea that Congress is going to wave away its right. What are you there for as a senator?
But to be fair, they haven't on that one.
No, they haven't on that one. But he wants them to again.
One way or the other, I just think that someone is going to end up being exposed as unbelievably corrupt.
Before you watch today's episode, we want to remind you that tickets are on sale for the Newsagents live shows with HSBC UK. We're kicking off our tour at the Birmingham Symphony Hall on February the 17th. Then we're off to the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester the following week on the 24th. And finally, the Usher Hall in Edinburgh on March the 11th. Head over to Global Player to get your tickets for any of these dates. The link will be in the description below. And we're very excited to see you there. This is what has been missing from your 2025 so far, a special edition of Question and Answer from the Newsagents. Right, the first question is from Mark Williams. Are there any reasons to be optimistic about Trump's presidency and believe it may not be incredibly damaging to the US and the wider world, in the same way as he probably learnt lessons from round one? Could the same be said of those who work in opposition to him? Thank you, Mark.
Are there any reasons to be optimistic? Not especially. No.
I think America's going to grow. I mean, I think America's economy is going to grow. I think it's going to be a sort of Saudi of the West.
Yeah,
it's going to be somewhere that is
collapse.
Moral-free zone, but plenty of cash knocking around. And if that makes you happy, and it will make a lot of people very happy, I think that is a reason to be optimistic.
But that's
just for and giggles, though, I'm going to be the optimistic one and say we've already seen his impact in Gaza. He wants to achieve things. He wants to get credit for them. I think that Ukraine might work out better than people had originally anticipated. And I think that the deregulation taking place in America will make Europe look at itself and think, how can we be more competitive to face the threat from America? And I think that's probably not a bad thing.
And I think that, to be completely opposite, I think the first few days have been darker, more corrupt, more unstable than even I had thought they would be.
Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's John.
It's Emily.
And it's a pessimistic Lewis.
Yeah. Eeyore, the dark cloud that hangs over Lewis Goodall's head, is in the studio right now.
Yeah, sad. Well, anyway, we've got another question here from Eamon. And all of these questions, by the way, are US, because nearly all the questions we had were US, and so if you don't like that, blame each other, really. Eamon from Belfast says, given Trump's inauguration, who do you think will be the first casualty of his cabinet?
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I mean, obviously, all you need to be the first casualty is the person who upsets Trump first. I think it's going to be Marco Rubio.
Yeah, I think so.
Because Marco Rubio he's the Secretary of State. He's slipped in there as a way of making Trump's first cabinet look fairly grown up and a bit normal. And I wonder whether Rubio will still be driven by things that are very different to the things that Trump is driven by, i.e. the natural order, NATO, a sort of sense of, America's position vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And I wonder if that will be the first clash. Trump will say, of course we're going to do this for Putin, or of course we're going to do this with Xi. And Rubio might just find that is something that he cannot go along with as easily.
So Marco Rubio, obviously he and Trump have got a lot of history, because Rubio, Florida senator, ran against Trump in 2016. Famously, they had an exchange, which perhaps we can listen to, about, well, it was about the size of their hands. Sort of.
Little Marco. And I'll admit, the guy, he's taller than me, he's like 6'2", which is why I don't understand why his hands are the size of someone who's 5'2". Have you seen his hands? They're like this. And you know what they say about men with small hands? You can't trust them.
He said I had small hands. Actually, I'm 6'3", not 6'2", but he said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
He is the closest that you get to a traditional Republican. And he upset Trump, but actually he paid the price the first time around. In 2016, he was out of the race pretty quickly after he said that. And I think Trump has sort of reached out to him as a way of kind of, keeping all the wings happy for now. There was a question about whether Rubio be his VP.
Yeah, Marco's put 10 years of kissing the ring in as well. This
completely. It's all kind of come full circle.
But if past his prelude, of course, the first person to go last time round was Rex Tillerson, who was the Secretary of State, who had come from Exxon. And I'll make a different prediction, not about who will be the first to go, but how they will go. Rex Tillerson was on a flight back from Africa where he'd been representing Trump in Africa when Trump tweets out that Tillerson, who is dumb as a rock, is fired.
Yeah.
And he is on the plane.
Yeah, Marco Rubio will be the last to know, or whoever it is, will be the last to know.
And on that plane coming back, Rex Tillerson didn't have Twitter on his phone. So his staff land at Andrews Air Force Base, turn on their phones and think, shit, our boss has just been fired. Which of us is going to tell him? And that's what happened with Rex Tillerson.
It was exactly the same with FBI. With do you remember with James Comey? So he was doing a tour of the FBI offices, and I think was it Vegas or Los Angeles?
Yeah, Los Angeles.
And he suddenly sees it on the television. It's like, oh, I'm just doing this tour of the offices. Oh, that's me.
That's me.
That's how you find out.
Exactly. That's how it will work in the Trump White House.
And one way or the other, I just think that someone is going to end up being exposed as unbelievably corrupt. I mean, I think the sheer amount of graft...
No, they're not going to get fired for being corrupt.
Well, maybe not, but this is the thing. I mean, one way or the other, the amount of graft of this administration, grifting and grafting in this administration, I think is already on another level. I mean, Trump himself, we've not talked about it this week because there's been so much going on. I mean, Trump himself literally has launched 2 days before he comes into office, launches his own kind of like version of Bitcoin or a bit of a sort of
I think that's what protects everyone from being fired for corruption.
But okay, well, let me put it another way. Half of them, and 12 of the incoming cabinet, which is amazing, are billionaires. Like, we've never seen anything like it before. People compare it to the Gilded Age. Like, honestly, the people in the robber barons, they weren't actually in the cabinet at the time. But I mean, whether they get fired for corruption, we should, in another era, half of them would have been.
Yes, I don't think anyone will get sacked for corruption and filling their boots. I think
they'll get tea and a tour of the White House.
Yeah, exactly.
Another one from Belfast. Hello, Phil. Phil says, I'd be interested to know why some things in the US can be changed at the wave of a pen in an executive order, while others need months of hard bargaining to get through Congress. Thanks for all you do. Love the show.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. We talked about this, Lewis and I, on the podcast, when was it, on Wednesday, about what has happened with TikTok, where Donald Trump has ignored a law that was passed and that was upheld by the Supreme Court to say TikTok can have a stay of execution for 75 days. Without getting into the merits or dismerits of that, the fact of the matter is that that is not what an executive order is for, but no one seems to stop him. What the Constitution says, that the President shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And in this case, there has not been a faithful execution of the law. So it's a very grey area now about what you can and can't do via executive order.
I mean, everyone has used executive orders. We shouldn't make it sound like it's a Trump speciality. I think everyone's used them except Harrison, who, famously died a month after his inauguration, his outdoor inauguration, from pneumonia. And I mean, Biden, I think, issued something like 42 in the first 100 days, which was more than pretty much anyone since the Second World War. So this goes hand in hand with the sort of first few days of a presidency. I've never seen it done sort of slightly lighter. I would say a corporate Christmas card whilst you're watching a show of majorettes in the Capital One Arena, where he was sort of signing them off as he went, or having to look up and say, what's this one for? What's this one for? He's done a lot.
Well, I mean, an executive order is simply something that the president has the legal obligation to do. So some of it is really easy, or the authority to do. Some of it, for example, I mean, he's in charge of the whole of the federal workforce. So he can say, as long as it's within the law, for example, what things that he's done this week about working from home and all of that, he can say, well, that's coming to an end. That's stuff that's clearly in his authority. The reason a number of us, but some of the stuff he's been doing is not necessarily within his gift or authority. So, for example, he has issued an executive order which basically says that the US federal government is no longer going to treat children who have been born to parents who do not have papers in the United States, but they themselves were born in the United States, that the federal government is going to start treating them differently. It's going to start sort of taking away their benefits and things like that. Now, that is not necessarily something that Trump has the legal authority to do, because the 14th Amendment is very, very clear that any child born or any person born in the United States is automatically a citizen. So what is going on with all of these executive orders is, to some extent, Trump just wanting to look strong and looking like he's got a kind of flurry of activity. As Emily says, the numbers of executive orders over many years have been going up as Congress has started to freeze up. And some of it is simply about him pushing at the extent and the boundaries of his authority.
I also think that actually, given that he has the House and the Senate, and given that the Senate is barely pushing back on what he wants to do anyway, it is... I mean, you were talking yesterday about the checks and balances, the three sort of arms of government. But if you now think, as many do, that essentially the legislative arm is weakened because Trump can push his lawmakers around as he sees fit, then he probably thinks, you know what, there might be a bit of a, toing and froing over this one, but sod it, I'm just going to sign it.
Yeah, exactly, because an executive order is something that Congress has given him the authority to do, or the Constitution has given him the authority to do.
Clinton signed, I think, the Kosovo War as an executive order, but he did it after it had been passed by Congress. He's just cutting out the middleman.
And sometimes Congress cares about that, and sometimes the Supreme Court cares about that. But right now, his bet basically is that neither care about anything he does, or are willing to give him extraordinary carte blanche.
Yeah. This is the bit I don't understand. I mean, it's the same over this kind of whole idea of recess appointments. The idea that Donald Trump would be able, when the House isn't sitting, to appoint anybody he wants to a senior role without a confirmation hearing. And what happens, because so much more is politicised in America, that you have to have confirmation hearings in the Senate before you become the US ambassador to London, or become the Secretary of State, or become the, whatever it happens to be. The idea that Congress is going to wave away its right. What are you there for as a senator?
But to be fair, they haven't on that one.
No, they haven't on that one. But he wants them to again.
But he doesn't need to. I mean, I think this is what I was trying to say, that the pushback that might have once been there isn't there. You talk to Republicans, pretty senior, pretty independent-minded Republicans. Are they minded to confirm RFK as health secretary? Well, I think I am. I've heard that now, and I think I am. Tulsi Gabbard, as director of national intelligence. Well, I think I am. He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to hide it. He doesn't need to do it in a recess. They're all there.
That's the thing. I mean, the big story about what's going on in America at the moment is basically Trump making a bet that his raw political power overcomes and supersedes the constitutional and legal limitations which may be placed upon him. And that, it seems to me, at least for the next couple of years until the midterms, or at least unless he gets himself into extraordinary difficulty over something unforeseen, that is going to be the sort of fundamental theme of American political life.
But going back to Phil's question about what can you do and can't you do, I mean, Joe Biden would have loved to have overturned the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade. Yeah. But he didn't, and then there were limited things he could do about kind of, contraception and stuff like that. But he couldn't overturn the Supreme Court decision, whereas Donald Trump is saying, well, I know the Supreme Court.
But did you see what Biden did just before he left? He, I think he tried to amend the Constitution, is it Article 28 on the Equal Rights Amendment, which again is something, that he can't really do independently. And it was his sort of last act, because he had a lot of pressure to try and safeguard female rights, women's rights in this kind of, next era. And he signed it off. He'd made a lot of people happy, but I don't think it holds water.
It sounds like we love talking about executive orders. That's just something we love to do.
It's so much more efficient.
It's so much more efficient. We're very executive. There's more of a legislature there. Graham Jones says, is there a reason that you have neglected to discuss Elon's salute? Elon Musk, lots of people saying that he made a Nazi salute at one of the Trump rallies. It feels like a real watershed moment for the normalisation of abhorrent behaviour, particularly with the lack of coverage it seems to be getting. I think this is a really interesting one, because I think that it's difficult, right? Because did he make a Nazi salute? I can completely buy that either idea is credible. I.e., I can imagine that, look, we know he's a deeply weird person. He's an odd guy. and he makes these kind of, he jumps around the stage, he makes all of these very odd movements everywhere, and he clearly wants to show, particularly as he's not a very good speaker, he often wants to show his kind of enthusiasm, his energy, his exuberance. And I can sort of imagine that he might have just been flailing his limbs about in that way. And you can't prove that he wasn't, although he actually hasn't actively denied it. But then on the other hand, this is a guy, and I think this is the important bit. In a way, for me, the salute is kind of neither here nor there. What do we absolutely know about Elon Musk? What we absolutely know about Elon Musk is that he has legitimized, restored to his platform, and consistently amplifies far-right messaging, far-right misinformation stories. We've seen the effect of that in our own country. And so in a way, with the salute, although it's symbolic, and I think liberals often get obsessed with symbolism, in a way, to me, it's kind of neither here nor there. The actually really important thing is what he does on a daily basis and how he pollutes the discourse, and we know he does that.
I sort of think, why are we bothering to give him the benefit of the doubt? His latest tweet, which I'll read in full: "Don't say Hess to Nazi accusations. Some people will Goebbels anything down. Stop goring your enemies." His pronouns would have been he, Himmler. Bet you did Nazi, that coming.
Hilarious.
It's hilarious, So the fact that he is leaning into this is, I guess, a provocation to all of us having this conversation about whether or not he's a Nazi. We know his views are of the far right. He espouses the views of Tommy Robinson and, as he said,
endorses
the AfD. So we're almost past that conversation. We know what we're dealing with.
And it's also, I think, Graham, it's a really great question, because we didn't do it. But then if we do it, you are playing into his hands. He wants to say, oh, look at the liberals, they're all losing their heads, they're all losing their over this, they can't,
Why are they calling Trump a fascist?
It's Trump, it's Musk derangement syndrome. He wants to create Musk derangement syndrome.
I was just moving my hand.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So judge him by what he does. He is the most powerful non-elected person in the world right now, it seems to me. He has Trump's ear.
He's probably the most powerful person in the world right now.
Yeah, arguably as equal with Trump, in the sense that he is right in there on every decision, and no one has voted for Elon Musk for anything.
And he might be allowed to buy TikTok, going back to our previous conversation, because of his proximity to Trump, so he might get even more powerful.
We'll be back after the break.
We are going to hear now from Michael Barclay.
Hello, Mike here, big fan of the show, and the inauguration coverage has been excellent as always. I've got two questions which are kind of related. The first one is about the presidential pardon, and I guess why it exists. It seems like it could be open to abuses of power, so I find it strange that there is the ability for one man or one person in the head of a state to just pardon people, and I wonder whether we have anything similar in the UK. And my second question, which is kind of the same thing really, which is, why is the president themselves immune to any form of prosecution? And why is that, as far as I understand, written in the Constitution? It doesn't seem beyond the realms of possibility that a sitting president might have committed or commit a crime. It could happen, maybe. Who could imagine that, really? So I just wonder, why is that written in the Constitution? It seems a bit strange. If there's any kind of interesting history about that, it'd be really cool to hear about it. Anyway, loving the show. Be cool if you answer my questions.
Mike, thank you.
So the Founding Fathers put in the power of pardon in the Constitution, partly because there's two reasons behind it, really. One is that actually, the weird thing about the US Constitution is that it's weirdly conservative, in the sense that it's basically a democratized, idealized version of the British Constitution, which they were basically basing it off, because that's what they knew, right? Fused with sort of Enlightenment ideas which were around at the time. So you've got the House of Commons, the House of Representatives, which is basically the House of Commons, the Senate, which is basically the House of Lords, and the President was basically like a king, albeit one that was, at least to some extent, democratically elected. And at the time, the king in Britain had the power of pardon, and it is connected to the second idea, which is about checks and balances. So every part of the American Constitution is the judiciary, the legislative branch, and the executive are a check and balance on the other. And the idea was that there are always miscarriages of justice committed by the courts. It can always be the case that maybe the Congress will pass laws which are too draconian, and therefore, in the theory at least, a wise man who would always be president, a man who was, guided by the best morality and the best thinking, would occasionally use his power of pardon to correct and to give mercy and to correct miscarriages of justice. As we know, it is rather open to, it doesn't always work out like that and can be open to some abuse.
And we don't have the same thing here anymore.
No, we don't, no. Theoretically, I think we do, but it never happens.
In France, at the end of a presidential term, there are amnesties given for parking tickets. So people go berserk in Paris just before the end of a president. It's just unbelievable. Because they know when the new president takes office, they will give an amnesty on parking tickets. So if you get a parking ticket in the last 6 months of someone's presidency, you never pay it. You wait for the new president to come in, amnesty.
When you lived there, did you just park wherever you wanted?
Yeah, well, we did.
Just in the last 6 months.
Just in the last 6 months. Before that, was very, very law-abiding.
Of course.
The pardons thing has been abused on both sides, let it be said. I mean, what Joe Biden did was pretty much on the margins of preemptive pardons, which was a kind of new territory. Anyway, but the second part of the question, why is the president immune to any form of prosecution? Well, that is something that has recently been tested and gone to the Supreme Court.
It's not in the Constitution.
No, it was to do with Donald Trump and what he had done with the squirreling away of the documents at Mar-a-Lago that were classified, that should have been handed over to the National Archive, and also his behaviour over January the 6th. And it got challenged at the Supreme Court about whether he had immunity from prosecution. And I think what the Supreme Court found was, and this is there were grey areas in their ruling, but that if it is in the transaction of your presidential duties, you do have immunity. But what happens if you order SEAL Team 6 to take out a political opponent because you believe it is good for the country? What's the grey area there? Is that legitimate or not legitimate? And those were the questions that were asked at the Supreme Court hearing. And the Supreme Court came down and gave Donald Trump widespread immunity. And the corollary of which is, we've heard that Donald Trump has talked about maybe going after Joe Biden. Well, he won't be able to, because Biden will have the same immunity from prosecution as Donald Trump now has.
We're going to get a question now from Holly. Hey, squad, like that.
Hey,
Constitutionally, can a two-term serving president serve again as a VP? For example, if Vance or another MAGA figure runs in 2028, could Trump run as part of the ticket? Thank you for everything. It makes my A-level politics more bearable. Holly and Pippa and Daisy. Hi, guys. We love you. Thank you. I mean, that was my thing. Thank you.
And hopefully the result's better as well. More bearable.
Yes. I'm sorry you failed. No, joke. I would say that it is incredibly unlikely that Donald Trump would ever want to be second to anyone on a ticket. So it will not happen, but it could. Because people were talking, do you remember at one point, people were talking about whether, I mean, this was really weird. They were talking about whether Biden or Kamala could bring back
Obama.
Barack Obama, who again wouldn't really want to be second, certainly not on a losing ticket. But technically, it's entirely possible, yeah.
What you don't really want with your constitution is there to be grey areas, but there is a little bit of a grey area in the sense that the 22nd Amendment says that no one can be president more than twice. But it doesn't say that you can't be elected vice president having been elected president twice. But then the 12th Amendment says that no person shall be elected president if they're not constitutionally eligible to be president, right? So there is basically a grey area as to whether maybe you could be elected vice president, but you couldn't succeed as president, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to be vice president in the first place. So it's like a grey area, but Trump's so old, I doubt it would ever happen.
Look, the interesting thing is whether you can envisage a Medvedev-Putin arrangement, whereby Putin does his 2 terms, gets Medvedev in, actually carries on being president, but nominally Medvedev is president, but he's all being controlled by Putin. Is it possible to imagine a scenario in which Trump is kind of brought back because he hasn't finished doing what he wants to do? He can't call himself the president, but he's basically puppeteering from that position. Of course, it's possible.
What you floated there about the Obama was seriously, looked at about what
not by Obama.
No, but about the constitutionality of, you get Biden, who is very old, running for president, and he puts Obama on the ticket, and if
God forbid,
the worst happened, you get Obama back as president, and a lot of people might have found that reassuring, and people thinking, that could be a winning combination and help Biden enormously if Obama is the VP on the ticket.
I mean, was anyone serious suggesting it?
People were seriously looking at the constitutionality of it. I don't think it was ever politically reality that Obama was going to accept the idea of running as VP to Joe Biden. but there were people who were seriously looking at whether that would get around the 22nd Amendment about 2 terms.
But it's the 12th Amendment. So the exact wording for that is this amendment states, no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to the office of vice president, which of course raises the question, is a 2-term president constitutionally ineligible to the presidency, or are they simply ineligible to be elected president again, right? And so the truth is if this ever happened, where would it end up? It would end up in the Supreme Court, which A, would be a nightmare, but also basically the outcome would depend on
the makeup of the
Supreme Court, which at least for the foreseeable future is going to be heavily Trump-oriented.
Good luck with that A-level.
Yeah, I'm just worrying that Holly, Pippa and Daisy are now thinking, why the bloody hell did we ask that question in the first place? Because we've just confused it all. No, it's unclear.
So not our fault. Take it up with James Madison.
What, you mean the Tottenham midfielder? The darts.
What are
James
you talking
Madison
about?
Well, he was.
There's only one James Madison.
And there's only one for me as well.
Yeah.
And he was a Virginia planter.
Oh, my place for Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah. Peter's email saying, Emily's handstand surely has to be the highlight of 2025 to date. Love the podcast. If you haven't seen this, Emily, for some reason, I still haven't quite gathered.
Performing cartwheels down the Mall.
Cartwheels down the Mall. Yeah. They should have been Arab Springs. I used to do gymnastics in my county.
Really?
Yeah, really.
What was your speciality?
It was...
Sorry, is there something called the Arab Spring?
Yeah, there is an Arab Spring. An Arab Spring is a jumping cartwheel.
Right.
I just thought if I did one of those, my boots would come off.
I thought it was a massive geopolitical event in 2011.
They named it after, obviously, the gymnastic move.
Right, I see. Were you good at the Arab Spring?
I was very good. I was good at the double Arab Spring.
And your coverage was superb.
Can we stop talking about Maitlis' gymnastics? Get on with the bloody question.
After Trump's inaugural speech of "We will expand our territories," Pete says, "Are America and Russia essentially just synonyms of each other? If this were Putin or Kim Jong-un making this speech, it would be met with widespread condemnation across all the world leaders, yet not a sound from them. Are we complicit in keeping quiet because the USA is on our side and Russia isn't?" Complex question, but interesting. Pete says about his own question. even if Pete does say so himself, it's quite an interesting question.
I mean, we have just been looking at this whole question. We discussed it a little bit on yesterday's episode of whether there is something afoot here, which is that when Trump talks about making America great again, we all assumed first time round he meant the economy or he meant the confidence of the country. Does he mean making it greater than America currently is?
Bigger.
Is he pushing out the boundaries? Can he do this without war, without invasion, without soldiers, but with a certain amount of economic heft, which makes land grabs essentially from places that he would quite like to bring in?
I don't think we are treating it in the same way as Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin. It's not because we're kind of cozying up to and we're friends of. I just think we think the whole idea is ridiculous. The idea that he's going to invade Panama or that he's going to try and take over Greenland by force.
The question is, who would stop him? Who would stop him genuinely? Would NATO stop him? Because America is NATO, right? Would China stop him? Would Russia stop him? China would just use it as a free ticket, a green ticket to go into Taiwan.
Bush invaded Iraq, no one stopped it. I mean, no one would.
That's
no
the
one
point.
Would be able to stop it.
So, I mean, we are getting ahead of ourselves here, Pete, and I don't think anyone's thinking that he's, kind of readying up the ignition on the tanks. Do they have ignition? Probably.
I'm not sure,
Is there a little
not
button?
my area.
I would only drive an automatic tank, not one with a gear stick. Anyway, I don't think we're thinking that he's about to do that, but I do think the bigger question is there any military power or world body, global body, that would stop him? And I don't know that there is.
And also, even if, let's just take it for the sake of argument that he's not serious about it. I think what you can definitely say, which I think Pete's question does get at, which is that it does embolden these people. I mean, one of the points, of the kind of liberal order, the post-war order, rules-based order, is that as imperfect as it was, at least there was a sense that it might put some constraints on states and the way they operate, which is more than might is right. Trump's whole worldview basically now, both domestically and internationally, is might is right. And that is basically what Putin thinks. That is basically what autocrats always think. If they have the means, then they will the ends.
You don't vote in a strong man, frankly, unless you expect them to be strong.
Yeah, so
right?
it just
that's what a lot of people in America think needs to happen now.
Well, perhaps, but nonetheless, what it will mean is, and it's totally on the liberal side of things for not being able to articulate this, is that the problem with it is that you embolden exactly the sorts of people in the sorts of regimes that you're trying to
stop.
Discourage.
Yeah. Also, I think Pete's question kind of points to one of the central contradictions of Trump and Trumpism. That here we have someone who says it's America first, we are retreating, we don't want to be the world policeman, we just want to get on with our lives quietly and ignore the rest of the world. And at the same time saying, yeah, but we'll have Greenland, and maybe Canada should become the 51st state, and I'd like to take over Panama, please. How do you reconcile these two completely different things from Trump?
Pete, you were right. It was complex.
Complex answers,
but interesting.
I tell you what, these questions have been great.
Yeah.
They're
We've
really
got a couple more to go.
Well, and one from Chris Bleach, who says, interesting that Trump brings back TikTok. Wonder what Elon's opinion of that was behind the scenes. Do we think that Elon and Donald Lovin will survive the presidential term? On that last bit, I think you and I disagree, John. I don't think it will survive. I know you've written to say you think it will. I don't think it will.
Well,
I think it's too good.
I totally agree with Mike Murphy, the great American commentator, who says they are two polecats in a single pillowcase. And that's why it's going to kind of explode and.
Too much big dick
I
energy.
also think the reason that you didn't just have Elon Musk behind Trump at the inauguration, but you had all of the tech giants, is because he's playing them off against each other. Just think what Zuckerberg says if TikTok goes to Musk, right? Just think how Bezos is feeling if Zuckerberg and Musk get ahead and he's left out. I think he keeps them all on their toes.
I tell you what, the remarkable thing about that is the extent to which kind of Zuckerberg and Musk are seen as sort of equal fighters in the social media space. I mean, Facebook is 1,000,000 times bigger than Twitter as a sort of platform.
Noisier.
Yeah, but Twitter is noisier. And in the Trump world, it's about making noise. Tension. I think the relationship lasts between Trump and Musk because there is so much mutual interest in it that Musk wants...
Got to get your flag on Mars.
Yeah, Musk wants what Trump's got. And Trump wants what Musk has got. Yeah. And I think the combination of the two will just about yoke them together for long enough.
What's amazing as well is that, like, something that people have been, when you looked at all the people who were around him, including Musk and all the sort of tech titans and whatever, the thing that I found chilling about it, I mean, there's the sort of point that people have been making about the oligarchy, sure, but it's quite an incomplete oligarchy, right? It's in the sense that basically it's the information oligarchy that's with him. It's not just like the head of Shell or or Exxon or whatever, these massive big companies. They're not there. It's not just rich people. It's people who basically can get his message out. That's the thing that I think's most chilling
control
about
the truth.
it. Yeah, and control the truth. It's not a complete oligarchy. It's like an informational oligarchy.
It's really interesting. I was noticing this on our flight back from Washington, which was this time round. Like the first time round, all the MAGA hats were kind of being worn by, your average Joe Trump fan, the people who'd kind of come out for the first time to be political, to celebrate him because they felt that he was speaking to them in a new way that nobody had done before. This time the MAGA hats are all in business class. They're on the seriously wealthy. And the whole stigma of being, pro-Trump has absolutely gone. If you are, it's a sign that you are rich now, if you're wearing
strong.
MAGA. Yeah.
And male.
We'll be back with one more question after the break. Final question from Ryan. Hello, newsagents. Question. Have you quietly thought to yourself, well, at least we'll have copy every day for the next 4 years? Is news now a form of entertainment? Keep up the great guilty pleasures, Ryan, brackets, middle-aged dog walker.
I was due out for dinner on Monday night when I heard these immortal words. It was at the ball, the military ball that they have where he does his first dance with Melania. And somebody said, the president would now like to make a few words. And my heart sank.
Never done a few words in his life.
Honestly, I was just back to where we were 8 years ago, because the moment the president would like to say a few words, your entire evening disappears. You have to sit there and listen to rambles about shark and electrocutions and windmills and tariffs if you're lucky, but most of the time it's about, Silence of the Lambs and all the rest of it. And so I pushed back my dinner by about 40 minutes because I didn't feel I could get away from the television. So when you say news is entertainment and sort of good copy, sort of, but also it's just, he's a massive time waster.
Yeah, he can
There's
be so boring.
much content and you have to sit through and sift through. It's like nobody has redacted Trump in a way that you really want to. You want to be able to just go, sorry, what's your top line? Because normally there isn't a top line. There's just a lot of words.
the question, it gets at a niggle, right, which is that there has always been truth in it. The fusion of Trump and news and how much, certainly in the first term, interestingly maybe a bit less now if the sort of subscriptions to some of the American papers and whatever, anything to go by. But, he has been very good for the news business, and he represents a fusion of the sort of triangle of politics, entertainment and news. No one is better. I mean, this is where I think Trump's political skill is extraordinary. He is, if Roosevelt was the first kind of, the radio address president, and then you get someone like Reagan and Clinton,
Kennedy,
who are the television, and Kennedy, the sort of television presidents. He is the modern multimedia president. He's great at television, he gets that, but there is no one better at social media and all those sorts of things. And we've not, the media, we've never found a way to respond to him.
But I don't know whether our listeners, actually, I mean, you've been really interesting because after Trump won, you kind of wanted to hear about Trump, but not that much. I mean, we kept on getting sort of pulled back by what you wanted, to kind of talking about
in which
UK
case they must be
issues.
thrilled by this episode.
Honestly, Ryan, I've got to be honest with you. The 4 years I was in Washington as the North America editor during the Trump years, you're on the lead story every night. Which journalist doesn't want that?
But I don't know if that's... So I told you I talked to a liberal newspaper person, and I said, is everyone, are you pleased that you'll get a lot more traction, a lot more stuff? He said, no, people aren't coming to us for Trump now. And I said, what are they coming to you for? He said, cooking, recipes and quiz games.
The people are exhausted. We talk about this on the show.
They're
exhausted, yeah.
I think that the way that people tuned out during Biden, which was a catastrophe for CNN and MSNBC and some of the other American networks.
Biden.
Well, there wasn't much to tune into. He didn't really speak.
Yeah,
he
that's
was
what I mean.
on in the background, right, as he
It was
promised.
background noise at volume 3.
Yeah.
We've got the volume turned back up to 10. We've gone from easy listening jazz to kind of drill music. Or drill music.
Hey. Still the best in the business.
Okay, I'll shut up now.
Yeah, we're going home.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.